Carried on. The United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, Bachelet, described the report about Uyghur, and she indicated that arbitrarily discriminative physical restraint towards Uyghur is likely to be equivalent to a crime against humanity. And she affirmed that serious human rights violation is being done on pretense of the countermeasure against terrorism and extremists by the Chinese government. And the United Nations ambassador of China protested against published report from the United Nations that denounced Chinese activity in conflict with human rights violation as interference with domestic affairs. So the picture that United Nations just denounced China's wrongdoing and appealed it to the international community, and China protested against the reported fact from the United Nations as fabrication has not changed now in the past for a long time in the history. So no matter how hard the United Nations devotes itself to the activities that enhance people's awareness of human rights, it can't play no more role than a spokesman that just announces the condition of human rights violation around the world. So needless to say, it doesn't have the privilege to intervene in domestic affairs of other countries that are suspected to violate human rights in order to instruct how they treat people. So what the United Nations can do is just letting us know what's going on there and just blaming the country for wrongdoing. So to tell you the truth, the issue of human rights violation will never be improved in the world fundamentally unless proactive interference in the domestic affairs of other countries and compulsory intervention in that country's administration and imposing sanction. So because the concerned countries that are suspected to violate human rights don't think that what they're doing is wrongdoing. So the situation is pretty much the same. Like bystanders are just protesting and yelling at police officers wrongdoing in front of them, but they can't get close to a police officer, and they have no choice but to keep distance from a police officer and just seeing what's going on there. And because bystanders already know that they're going to get arrested if they get close to a police officer, so this is a threat of police that discourages people from using direct force to a police officer. So China is a power with a nuclear weapons, and it is one of the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So possession of nuclear weapons is the biggest threat that discourages any countries and even the United Nations from taking drastic measure against human right violation done by the Chinese government. So, and the United Nations just cannot help looking on this situation with folded arms. So as long as the definition of peace in the world is just equal to the world's stability, preserved by the equilibrium of threat of powers with the nuclear weapons, nobody can stop tyranny of permanent members of the Security Council in the United Nations. So furthermore, there's one more problem. So that is veto in the United Nations. This is one of the worst reasons that keeps the United Nations from taking drastic measure against China. Thanks to veto, China can exercise its veto against an unreasonable resolution for China. So the Security Council of the United Nations consists of 5 permanent members and 15 normal members, and each member has the vote, and the decision on procedural matters is made by at least 9 approvals from members. So the decision of procedural matters are like the decision for whether or not they put it on the agenda, and they discuss it as important matters or primary matters. So the decision on primary matters is made by at least 9 approvals, including approvals from 5 permanent members. And permanent members are given veto a dissenting vote that has the power to reject the resolution itself. So, in other words, if one of the permanent members exercises veto towards a resolution, everything goes back to square one, even if obtaining other members' consensus. So basically, resolution in military alliance must be approved unanimously without exception. So League of the Nations was out of control and came to an end because of not being able to obtain a consensus from members unanimously, thanks to veto and major powers opt out in World War II. So in the first place, at least world stability is established by permanent members of the United Nations, including China. Improvement of China's human rights violation is almost impossible, realistically, except for the way of denouncing China's wrongdoing and appealed it to the international community and convincing China to change its mind. But this is not going to be a fundamental solution